At the first light of dawn on June 19, 2025, thousands of Tanzanians stood shoulder to shoulder along the misty shores of Lake Victoria. The air was still, the water calm, and yet something monumental was stirring. From the fog emerged a massive steel and concrete structure, 3.2 kilometers long, silent, unapologetic, and unexpected. No fireworks. No music. Just a bridge. And with it, a new era. This was not just any bridge. This was the John Pombe Magufuli Bridge, the longest bridge in East and Central Africa, and the most ambitious infrastructure project Tanzania has ever completed. But what truly captured global attention wasn't just its size. It was how it came to be. Tanzania built this colossal structure with no foreign loans, no donor aid, no international hand-holding. Just national resolve, strategic sacrifice, and quiet determination. In a world where developing nations are often expected to wait their turn, Tanzania didn't wait. It acted. The questions came fast. How did this happen without debt? Why here, in the often forgotten lake region? What does this bridge mean, not just for Tanzania, but for Africa? Is it a one-time miracle or a roadmap for a new kind of future? This video will answer all of that. Step by step, we'll uncover the politics, the money, the symbolism, and the very human stories behind this megastructure. Because this bridge isn't just a structure made of steel, it's a declaration written in concrete. A message to the world: Africa doesn't need permission to rise. On the morning of June 19, 2025, something strange and beautiful unfolded along the shoreline of Lake Victoria. There were no marching bands, no giant speakers, no glitter raining down from the sky. But thousands came. They arrived before the sun did, some on foot, others on bikes, many simply walking out from their homes in nearby villages. Children climbed onto rooftops. Traders left their market stalls empty. Local fishermen who had never left the lake in decades stood in silence. They were all waiting. And then it happened. Through the early fog, a shadow began to rise. It stretched further than anyone imagined, like the spine of a great steel animal, emerging from water and mist. The John Pombe Magufuli Bridge had arrived, not with a bang, but with awe. No fireworks were needed. The sight of it was louder than any noise. It didn't scream for attention. It stood tall and calm, letting people feel the weight of its presence. That moment was emotional. Not just because of the size of the bridge, but because no one had believed it would happen so fast, or so quietly. For years, people had grown used to promises that never came true. Grand infrastructure plans would be announced with fanfare, only to vanish into red tape and delays. But this was different. The bridge was real. It was right there, unmissable, unmistakable, undeniable. Parents held their kids higher to get a better view. Young people took selfies not just for the likes, but because they knew they were witnessing history. Even the elderly, some walking with sticks or holding onto others for balance, came out to see. "This changes everything," one woman was heard saying. "Now we don't have to wait on the water anymore." Cars began to cross slowly, first a few government vehicles, then buses, then trucks. People cheered. Not in the staged, political kind of way, but the raw, emotional kind. The kind that bubbles up when you realize your life just got easier, faster, better. In that early morning light, something else became clear: the bridge was more than concrete and steel. It was a promise kept. A dream turned tangible. It was a quiet revolution that didn't need foreign headlines or validation. It was Tanzania saying, "Look what we've built, with our hands, our money, and our belief." The moment the bridge appeared, the country didn't just gain a road, it gained confidence. The kind of confidence that says, we can do hard things. And we can do them our way. Before the bridge, crossing Lake Victoria between Kigongo and Busisi wasn't just a trip, it was a test of patience. Every day, long lines of cars, buses, and trucks would snake toward the water's edge, waiting for a ferry that may, or may not, show up on time. Sometimes the lake was calm. Other days it was rough and unpredictable. Ferries would break down, or stall for hours. Travelers would sit in their vehicles, watching the clock, missing meetings, losing business, or simply burning daylight. For school children, it meant waking up before sunrise. For traders, it meant spoiled goods. For patients needing urgent medical care, it meant dangerous delays. And then one day, it all changed. The John Pombe Magufuli Bridge cut what used to be a 1-hour ordeal down to just 4 minutes. 4 minutes. That's all it takes now to drive across from one side to the other. No waiting. No water delays. No guessing. Just a straight, smooth path over one of Africa's largest lakes. Locals describe it as teleportation. Drivers who once had to plan their days around ferry schedules now find themselves surprised at how quickly they arrive. Some still check their watches out of habit, old routines that haven't caught up with the new reality. One driver laughed and said, "I used to charge my phone and nap before crossing. Now I barely finish my coffee." For people who transport goods, especially perishables like fish, fruit, or vegetables, the impact is massive. What used to be a race against time has turned into reliable, efficient logistics. Trucks full of Nile perch now make it from Mwanza to Rwanda without needing extra ice. That saves money, reduces waste, and increases profits. But it's not just about goods. It's about dignity. It's about not feeling stuck. It's about knowing you can get where you need to go, when you need to go. That's a kind of freedom that can't be measured just in kilometers or fuel costs. This isn't just a time saver. It's a mindset shift. The bridge turned a daily inconvenience into a daily miracle. And for people who had long accepted that this is just how it is, it offered something radical, a better way. A new normal. The first question that echoed through local cafes, newsrooms, and WhatsApp groups across Africa wasn't about the length of the bridge, or how fast it opened. It was this: where did the money come from? A project like the John Pombe Magufuli Bridge doesn't come cheap. It cost nearly $300 million to build, an amount that would usually come stamped with donor logos, international flags, or some kind of ribbon cutting by foreign dignitaries. But this time? Nothing. No "funded by" banners. No IMF tweets. No press releases from the World Bank. Just silence. And that silence spoke volumes. Behind the scenes, Tanzania had been doing something unusual and radical. For a developing country, it was building quietly, with its own money. No loans. No aid. No permission slips. It started with an idea that was almost too simple to believe: what if we just saved and spent wisely? According to leaked parliamentary documents from 2023, the strategy had been years in the making. The government quietly began shifting its priorities. Certain imports were paused. Big purchases from abroad were delayed. Subsidies that weren't essential were trimmed. Construction projects considered low impact were shelved temporarily. Even government hiring slowed down, not forever, but long enough to redirect resources. Meanwhile, revenue streams from gold, agriculture, tourism, and especially value-added tax, VAT, were funneled into a special infrastructure fund. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't make headlines. But it was smart. It was disciplined. And it was effective. Instead of borrowing money and then waiting months or years to negotiate terms with lenders, terms that often come with strings attached, Tanzania decided to set the terms itself. That meant full control over timelines, contractors, and priorities. It meant the freedom to use local labor, local materials, and local decision-makers. This wasn't just a financial strategy. It was a political statement. It said, we are not afraid to live within our means. We are not afraid to sacrifice short-term comforts for long-term strength. And that kind of boldness made people nervous, especially the ones who are used to Africa always asking for help. One foreign journalist whispered off camera, if this is real, and other countries copy it, the whole aid model could collapse. That wasn't exaggeration. Because if Tanzania can self-fund a 3.2 kilometers megabridge, what else can it do? What else can other African nations do? This wasn't just an economic move. It was a challenge to the global order. And here's the most powerful part, there were no press conferences bragging about it. President Samia Suluhu Hassan didn't go on television every week to boast. She just opened the bridge, let the people walk across it, and said, it's ready. In that moment, the bridge itself became the speech. The strategy. The proof. And it left the world with one simple, uncomfortable truth. Africa doesn't have to wait. It just needs to decide. The name etched into the steel and stone of the bridge isn't just decorative, it's declarative. John Pombe Magufuli, the late president of Tanzania, wasn't merely a former head of state, he was a symbol. A figure both admired and criticized, celebrated and feared. But more than anything, he was known for his unwavering belief in African self-reliance. Naming the bridge after him wasn't a bureaucratic decision, it was a message. Magufuli stood for a different kind of leadership, one that cut through bureaucracy, rejected waste, and demanded efficiency from government institutions. During his time in office, he became known as the bulldozer. Not just for his infrastructure ambitions, but for his determination to push through the noise and build roads, hospitals, power stations, and now, this bridge. By placing his name on the structure, Tanzania wasn't just honoring his memory, it was cementing his philosophy into the landscape. When President Samia Suluhu Hassan, his successor, walked across the newly finished bridge at its inauguration, she didn't deliver a long speech. She didn't promise miracles. She simply declared it open. And that act, quiet as it was, carried massive weight. She didn't need to say much. The bridge had already spoken. It said, we are continuing. It said, this vision didn't die when Magufuli did. It said, we can disagree on methods, but the mission stays. And that's what made the moment so powerful. In a continent often shaken by abrupt policy shifts after leadership changes, this bridge represented continuity. Stability. A sense that some ideas, like self-determination, infrastructure-first growth, and national pride, could survive beyond any one leader. But it also did something more daring. It reclaimed political legacy, not through ideology, but through concrete results. It wasn't about party slogans or talking points. It was about a 3.2 km long fact on the ground. Something no argument could erase. The John Pombe Magufuli Bridge now stands not just as a physical link between Kigongo and Busisi, but as a philosophical bridge between what Tanzania was, what it is, and what it could become. Long before the first car crossed the Magufuli Bridge, its impact had already begun. During construction, over 1,500 Tanzanians were hired, not just for manual labor, but for skilled roles often reserved for foreign contractors. Welders, engineers, drone operators, structural analysts. They weren't just part of the project, they were essential to it. Under strict conditions set by the Tanzanian government, the Chinese company hired to build the bridge was required to train and empower local workers. And they did. For the first time on a project of this scale, Tanzanian engineers weren't just standing by, they were in the rooms where decisions were made, crunching numbers, running site logistics, and leading technical teams. One young civil engineer, trained on site, later shared, "I didn't just work on a bridge. I built my future on it." And she wasn't alone. Today, many of those same workers have moved on to other infrastructure projects across the country, highways, stadiums, energy plants, bringing with them new skills, confidence, and a sense of national purpose. But the story didn't stop when the last bolt was tightened. As soon as the bridge opened, an entire microeconomy exploded on both ends of the crossing. On the Kigongo side, a simple roadside grill selling tilapia and maize started seeing dozens of customers an hour. Then came a tire repair shop. Then another. Within 6 months, 5 were in operation. Traders who once waited idly for ferries were now serving passing drivers. Makeshift markets popped up selling fruits, vegetables, building supplies, electronics, even second-hand clothes. These weren't flashy, foreign-funded developments. They were grassroots businesses, built by locals, for locals, in response to a sudden surge in foot traffic and vehicle flow. And the money kept moving. Land prices began to soar. One local land broker claimed that prices on both sides of the bridge had tripled in less than half a year. Restaurants expanded. Lodges were booked out. People who once thought of Kigongo and Busisi as isolated dots on a forgotten map now saw opportunity in every passing truck and tourist bus. And let's not forget the ripple effect on logistics and trade. Truck drivers transporting fish, cotton, grains, and vegetables from Mwanza to Dar es Salaam, once forced to plan for long delays, were now cutting full days off their routes. Perishable goods arrived fresher. Fuel costs dropped. More trips meant more income. One driver explained, "I used to add ice to the fish twice on the way to Rwanda. Now, I don't even need to once." That single adjustment, no ice, might seem small. But multiply it across hundreds of trucks, thousands of tons of goods, and you get a national-level improvement in efficiency and profit. But perhaps the most remarkable outcome isn't economic. It's emotional. People feel different. They feel faster. More connected. More valuable. In a country where delays were normal and inconvenience was expected, the bridge became a daily reminder that progress doesn't have to wait. And when something that once seemed impossible becomes routine, when people stop talking about the new bridge and start calling it just the way, that's when you know the future has arrived. The John Pombe Magufuli Bridge wasn't just a tool for trucks and trade. It quietly rewired the daily lives of thousands. For years, the ferry between Kigongo and Busisi dictated the rhythm of life. Students woke at 4 a.m. to ensure they'd make it to school on time, if the ferry wasn't delayed. Health workers missed appointments. Expectant mothers facing complications prayed they wouldn't go into labor on a bad day for the lake. Time wasn't just lost. It was feared. But now? That fear is gone. The bridge stands still. Always open. Always ready. It doesn't care if the lake is calm or angry. It doesn't operate on a timetable. It doesn't cancel. It just is. Children get more sleep. Teachers start class with full rooms. Nurses cross zones to deliver vaccines without worrying about being stuck. Emergency vehicles arrive when they're needed, not hours later. In places where delay once meant danger, the bridge introduced something simple but revolutionary: predictability. And with predictability comes possibility. Communities that once felt disconnected from each other are becoming integrated zones of life and work. Family members visit more often. Events and markets draw crowds from both sides. People are applying for jobs they previously couldn't reach. Even small social shifts, like being able to plan a dinner with friends or a wedding without transportation anxiety, are reshaping local culture. Something as utilitarian as a bridge is now creating space for joy, for connection, for better futures. And it's also altering how people perceive themselves. For generations, living far from Tanzania's major cities often meant feeling forgotten, stuck on the margins of development. But now, this once overlooked region has become a symbol of progress. In short, infrastructure changed identity. The bridge didn't just bring two shores together, it reconnected people to hope, to dignity, and to each other. Before the bridge, Lake Victoria's southern edge was rarely seen as a tourist magnet. It was beautiful, yes, but remote, disconnected, and inconvenient. Travelers had to time their trips with ferry schedules, brace for delays, or skip the region entirely. Tour companies focused on more accessible landmarks: Serengeti, Kilimanjaro, Zanzibar. Then everything changed in 4 minutes. The Magufuli Bridge didn't just connect towns, it rewired the travel map. Suddenly, what used to be a detour became a destination. Now, tourists, both international and local, are weaving the bridge into their journeys. A weekend trip to Rubondo Island or a drive along Lake Victoria is no longer a logistical headache. It's a spontaneous plan. Just gas up the car, grab your camera, and go. Some tour companies even offer bridge sunrise experiences, drives timed with the morning mist, baskets of local breakfast in hand, complete with stops for photos overlooking the calm, open water. What was once just a road is now part of the attraction. Lodges that were once half full now report full bookings weeks in advance. Local guest houses are expanding. Even small roadside food stalls are adapting, offering QR code payments, menus in English, and little touches that signal, "We're ready for guests." Perhaps most importantly, Tanzanians themselves are becoming tourists in their own country. Families that never thought of travel now hop in vans for weekend getaways. Young people explore their region with pride. It's no longer just foreign visitors exploring Tanzania. It's Tanzanians, too. The bridge didn't just make travel easier. It made it accessible. And in doing so, it reminded people that adventure doesn't need a passport. Sometimes, it's just 4 minutes away. It's tempting to call the Magufuli Bridge a miracle. To see it as an outlier. A one-time success in a place where expectations have been low for too long. But what if it isn't? What if this bridge, rising from the lake mist, isn't the exception, but the beginning of a new rule? That question is what makes the bridge so powerful, and so disruptive. Because if Tanzania can self-fund a $300 million megastructure, while maintaining control, quality, and local benefit, then what exactly is stopping others? What if the real barrier wasn't money, but mindset? What if Africa doesn't need permission anymore? This isn't about nationalism. It's about ownership. It's about who gets to decide what's possible. For decades, the development model has operated on the belief that African countries must wait, for approval, for financing, for technical experts, for hand-holding. But the Magufuli Bridge is asking a dangerous question: what if that's all been a lie? What if development doesn't have to come from the outside in, but from the inside out? Already, this idea is spreading. Policy makers in other countries are holding quiet meetings. Students are challenging their professors. Economists are reconsidering what feasibility really means. Not because they want to build bridges, but because they want to build differently. And here's where it gets even more serious. There's fear, not in Tanzania, but in the institutions that thrive on African dependency. If this model spreads, it undermines decades of influence. It